Hello, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and I invite all of you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of August the 14th. So, like this video, don't forget to do these actions. It helps us to provide the best video to the more wide auditory. So, like it, share it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and leave your comments below. Let's move on, guys, to the situation on what is happening near the Pokrovsk region, especially the city of Dobropillia, where a local breakthrough by Russian occupation forces took place recently, not so long time ago. I can say actually in advance that the situation there has been improved slightly to some positive side, but let's not rush really hard because it's only just the beginning to getting better this situation. So right now I'll describe everything more detailed. So stay with us, stay tuned. Let's begin.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
I'll start the review. Of course, we're jumping right in to discuss the situation near Dobropillia. These two, which have already been called rabbit ears, by the way, created by the Russians, or bunny ears, that the Russians have made in the Dobropillia area. What's happening with them now? I don't want to get ahead of myself and announce any overly triumphant news, but in reality there is ongoing combat activity around this so-called Dobropillia worm, or the Kalushki. It has a more or less positive trend, more or less, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. In particular, the Azov Corps is operating here right now. Certain things still need to be done, although the occupiers themselves have already started whining quite a lot about what's actually happening on this section of the front. These are the kinds of photos, or rather these kinds of posts that they are publishing on social media. What do these posts mean? You can read them for yourself. After breaking through 16 kilometers to Dobropillia, the fighters from the 55th are left without evacuation, food or water, and are under attack from the Ukrainian armed forces from all sides. Well, really, in such cases, these kinds of breakthroughs are exactly where the main warning lies. It's very difficult to maintain their logistics. The Russians broke through using only infantry. As I mentioned earlier, we redirected very capable units here, ones that are able to create kill zones. And now these kill zones are being established and all of the enemy's logistics are being destroyed. A safari is underway, searching for those Russians who made it to this point of the local breakthrough. In addition to all this, Azov as a whole is doing an excellent job capturing Russian servicemen. There are already a few of them. Well, I can say that this situation has, shaken up our command a bit, so to speak, showing that we do have some real organizational problems because such local breakthroughs are impossible without questions about organization. First and foremost, this is about organization. First and foremost, this is about forming a second line of defense, a second echelon. This is about the issue of reserves. This is about whether we have enough reconnaissance assets or not, because right now it's very important to have a sufficient and high quality amount of reconnaissance resources. These should include, of course, various types of Mavics, optical fiber drones, strike drones, FPVs, and ground robotic systems for logistics, because all these assets essentially make it impossible for infantry to remain on the front line. Enemy infantry, but unfortunately ours as well. There is also a great danger here because the enemy infantry, they don't care about their own soldiers. As for our infantry, due to the battlefield being completely transparent, we can't keep enough of our people at the front, even if we had them there, because they would simply be live targets. Unfortunately, the Russians can use a lot of these live targets, and they basically throw them, so to speak, into breakthroughs using a kind of infiltration tactic with bait. While some are being targeted, others are breaking through. This is an absolutely cannibalistic tactic, but it is used by the Russian Federation, and it works. It works, and those who break through make it past these kill zones and get into our rear. Now, of course, as the area has been saturated with additional drones, including various units and subdivisions, the kill zones are increasing and expanding, and as a result, the Russians are facing rather unpleasant conditions for survival. And in particular, these images are very premature, I would say, regarding the cutting off of their logistics. Moreover, this supposed cutoff is even being shown in the settlement of Koptivka, meaning that even with the improvement of the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, such a cutoff does not exist. Well, that's not the case, let's be honest. Let's not spread any sweeping propaganda here, but it's clear that our soldiers will continue to work on this. They are currently doing everything possible and necessary on their end. And one more thing I would say, this local breakthrough by the enemy near Dobropillia has highlighted another problem. Obviously, as I said, there are major questions regarding the organization of our defense. Clearly, this situation also shows that, it turns out that our commander of the Joint Forces Group Dnipro, let me remind you, that's Drapati now. Drapati has no reserves. So is this a matter of rivalry between the general staff, the commander-in-chief, and the commander, or is it something else? It turns out that in the Sumy region, we do have reserves. I never thought I would say this because I have always been a supporter of the Kursk operation. But what is currently happening in the Sumy region when villages are being taken up to the state border, I can't say these are unnecessary actions, but, well, it does look strange when we have assault units in the Sumy region. Yet at the same time, there are none in the reserve of the commander of the sector, the most difficult sector, where the number of combat engagements is consistently the highest, namely in the Dobropillia Pokrovsk direction. When these reserves, which are needed to stop local enemy breakthroughs, turn out to be unavailable, it's because there is no timely response to the corresponding action. And in the Sumy region, in fact, our military and political leadership is, so to speak, quite pleased with this. There are statements. Just yesterday I missed one, but the day before there was a statement about Stepny and Pershytravnya, a settlement which is now no longer called Pershytravnya, but Kostiantynivka. Here it is, if you zoom in, yes, it's there. The General Staff announced that supposedly these settlements have been liberated, even though on the deep state map they weren't even marked as gray or red zones, meaning they had already been completely cleared during recent operations. I'm not saying this is completely unnecessary, it's just that it seems to me, and many in the military share this opinion, that, well, frankly, if we are able to carry out countermeasures in the Sumy region, why aren't we doing the same now in Donbas? This raises a big question, you have to agree, there are reasonable questions here. We need to have these reserves so that, God forbid, when similar local breakthroughs like the one near Dobropillia occur, we can eliminate them immediately. Meanwhile, yesterday, Zelensky also rather, boasted, I would say, about the information that the armed forces of Ukraine have liberated 6 out of 18 occupied villages in the Sumy region. At certain points, specifically at 2 locations, Ukrainian soldiers managed to reach the border with the Russian Federation. And yesterday morning, the president was briefed about the clearing of another 900 meters in the Sumy region near several points up to the border. And I can't say that this doesn't make me happy, but it doesn't, as I've already said. I think there's a completely reasonable question that arises here. Why? Why? Why don't we have these resources in Donbas? These are real organizational problems. So it's not even a matter of the number of people here, nor is it about the number of drones. It's a matter of organizing the resources we have. If they can be organized properly and efficiently, if there's no micromanagement, including from the general staff, regarding specific locations, positions, tree lines, and so on, then these things can be done. If not, then we see situations like this. I'm not hinting at anything. These are just my thoughts and assumptions. But returning to the situation near Pokrovsk, I really want to emphasize, regarding what's happening near Dobropillia, I say, maybe, God willing, it will all end positively. But while all this is happening here with these bunny ears, we must not forget about the critically important situation unfolding in Rodinska, and now also in Bilitska. We have 2 settlements that the Russians are pressing on, which are part of our logistics for the Pokrovsk-Vinohradske agglomeration, and into which, as you can see, they are essentially driving a wedge between them through Suvorov toward Shevchenka to Novoalexandrivka. The Russians are trying to break through. To the east of Rudinsky, they are trying to break through, and from the southeast toward Bilitsky, and overall, they are trying to completely destroy our logistics. That's why we need to pay serious attention to Rudinsky. It would be really great, of course, if we managed to cut through just as it's shown on that map, as was demonstrated on that map, all the way to Koptiv to neutralize the achievements of the Russian forces. But I'm afraid that in the current reality, this will be extremely difficult. I would be glad, of course, if this happened, but as of today, we are not seeing such a trend. In addition, there are recent and credible reports from our brave soldiers that the Russian forces are actively and persistently trying to probe another vital logistic supply route, which specifically runs from the strategically important city of Pokrovsk to Pavlohrad and Dnipro, using their advanced FPV drones, particularly along the critical fiber optic communication lines. Just yesterday, there was an incident in the area of Mejova, and that's a bit further on, well, near the turn to Mejova, which is already in the territory of Dnipropetrovsk region, right at the turn here, right by Mejova, when the Russians hit with an FPV drone here and destroyed our vehicle that was turning here. So, well, that's the situation. That is now even this Pokrovsk-Myrnohradsky agglomeration highway and its connected logistics are starting to come under Russian control, particularly drone control. It's actually the same situation in the Kostiantynivka direction. Recently, we've been talking a lot about Dobropillia, but it's also worth paying attention to the areas of Drushkivka and Olekseyevo-Drushkivka, which are likewise logistical hubs that are extremely important for Kostiantynivka. And this route between Drushkivka and Kostiantynivka is already gradually coming under enemy fire, especially from drones using fiber optics. This is because the Russians, in particular, have advanced in the direction of Poltavka and have taken control of the heights here, heights that allow them to target Rusin Yar. And after passing these last lines of defense, we see that the Russians find themselves facing a certain void, into which they can, of course, infiltrate quite quickly. Well, it's a double-edged sword here. They can infiltrate more quickly in this area, but on the other hand, they can also be destroyed here more quickly. The main thing is to have a sufficient number of units and our operators who create kill zones here. Therefore, without a doubt, further logistical issues for the entire Kostiantynivka hub are now, let's say, more relevant than ever. All the more so because in the Toretsk area, the enemy is now also pressing on one of our important defense nodes in Klebanbek and Katerinivka. The Russians are pushing on Katerinivka from the south, trying to enter it. There is even some information that the enemy is already entrenching themselves on the southern and southwestern outskirts of Katerinivka. That is right here. And yet there are still nodes of our defense within the settlement itself. Fighting is ongoing. In some places, even for individual houses in the south of Katerinivka. In addition, east of Klebanbek, right here, the Russians are also pressing, trying to push our troops back, essentially to encircle them here, but they are not succeeding. Overall, the Klebanbek and Katerinivka defense node is holding. It is holding. The Russians want to break it, but it is holding just as, for example, the Chasiv Yar area is holding, although there are certain escalations here as well. But overall, Chasiv Yar is still standing, and there is no situation where the enemy has captured it. Well, it's not even appropriate to talk about anything close to that. Today, I'm just giving an overview with a focus, not only on the Dobropillia Pokrovsk direction, but also on other sections of the front, so that at some point we don't miss them, don't overlook them in the public discourse about what is happening, where and how. We have an extremely difficult situation in the Kupiansk area. The enemy claims that they have carried out operations here, and not only the enemy, even our general staff reports that the Russians are actually attacking Myrn and Sobolivka here, launching attacks specifically on these locations. Myrne and Sobolivka are located here, and, well, Sobolivka is actually just 2 kilometers from the highway that connects Kupiansk to the west. To the west of Kupiansk, this road passes through Veliki Burluk. Sorry, not Veliki Burluk. This road, it goes to Chuhuiv. Here is the Kharkiv-Chuhuiv-Kupiansk highway. That's it, Kharkiv-Chuhuiv-Kupiansk. And we also have a road to the north, which used to go to Veliki Burluk and further on to Vovchansk. It has already been cut off by the enemy. There is no logistics here anymore, right here. And now the Russians are trying to focus on this road here, which connects Kupiansk with Chuhuiv. If the Russians manage to cut off this highway, which runs to the west, this highway right here, then we will face some very dangerous trends for our entire group of forces stationed on the left bank of the Oskil. So once again, these are logistical strikes, not frontal assaults, but logistical strikes that the enemy is carrying out everywhere along the front. Accordingly, our logistics around Kupiansk are now, well, essentially in a critical state, in critical threatening situations, because the enemy is very close to cutting off this logistics route and creating a direct threat that our troops on the left bank of the Oskil River could be cut off from these supply lines. That's why it's absolutely necessary and important to pay close attention to all these areas where fighting is taking place. Novopavlivka, right now, the enemy is conducting attacks along the borders of Donetsk region. Here on the Novopavlivka axis. In fact, the enemy has been stopped here, but we know that an additional 5,000 troops are now arriving from the Kursk or Sumy directions, as the president reported the day before. And then there's the Zaporizhzhia region. Zaporizhzhia region, where the third wave of the Russian offensive is already being prepared. The 2 previous waves were essentially thwarted, in part thanks to railway sabotage carried out by our forces. Now, this active pressure on Zaporizhzhia is resuming again, so to speak, at least with the redeployment of additional resources here. But it's also worth noting that our troops are carrying out preparatory preventive work here as well. This was reported yesterday by Petro Andriishchenko. He is the head of the Center for the Study of Occupation. He specifically mentioned that just yesterday morning, bodies were brought to the Mariupol morgue, literally just sorted in these garbage bins, essentially, and that 60 bodies of Russian soldiers from the Zaporizhzhia direction were brought there. They were transported in vans and ambulances almost all night. Well, to understand the scale of the problem, obviously this was a strike on a very important Russian position. So just imagine they had to haul all of this from the Zaporizhzhia direction all the way to Mariupol. How many kilometers is that? That is, all the other morgues along the way were filled, and 60 of these corpses, Russian bodies, were brought all the way to Mariupol. What kind of strike was that? Let's wait and see. According to some information, there were both officers and enlisted men there. So basically, something pretty serious hit the occupiers' positions there, with the aim of disrupting what is now already the third wave of the Russian occupiers' offensive in the Zaporizhzhia direction. They are bringing in up to 15,000 servicemen from the Kursk region for this. That's how things stand for us today, friends. I ask you to like this video, leave comments, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and take care of yourselves. All the best, and see you next time.